What if the point of adaptation isn't accuracy, but honesty? Today we're talking about Bride and Prejudice and how love, power, and identity look when filtered through multiple cultural lenses instead of one. For context, Bride and Prejudice is a colorful, modern, Bollywood-style adaptation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Set in India, it follows Lalita, a smart and spirited young woman, as she navigates love, family expectations, and cultural clashes when the wealthy American Will Darcy enters her life. When Gurinder Chadha's Bride and Prejudice arrived in 2004, critics seemed genuinely confused. Was it Bollywood? Was it Hollywood? Was it a serious Austen adaptation or a musical spectacle? Many reviews treated it as either diluted Jane Austen or an overstuffed rom-com that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Yet this response misses the entire point. Bride and Prejudice was never trying to compete with the 2005 Pride and Prejudice or any faithful period adaptation. It was doing something entirely different, translating Austen's social satire into a contemporary global context, where marriage, class, and cultural pride still dictate women's lives. The biggest difference between Bride and Prejudice and traditional Austen adaptations lies in what each prioritizes. The 2005 Pride and Prejudice, directed by Joe Wright, is a masterclass in atmospheric fidelity. It recreates Regency England with meticulous attention to mud, candlelight, and social constraint. Keira Knightley's Elizabeth Bennet exists within a world of unspoken rules, where every glance carries weight because speech itself is monitored. The film's strength is its immersion in a specific historical moment, allowing audiences to experience the claustrophobia of early 19th century marriage markets. Chadha's film takes a fundamentally different approach. Instead of recreating Austen's world, it asks what Austen's themes look like transplanted into early 2000s India, where arranged marriages still shape women's futures and globalization creates new hierarchies of cultural power. Lalita isn't fighting corsets and country dances. She's navigating a world where her mother's desperation to marry off 4 daughters feels both traditional and modern, where American corporate wealth carries different implications than British landed gentry, and where cultural pride becomes feminist resistance. The film doesn't soften Austen's class critique so much as relocate it, showing how systems of marriage and money still control women's autonomy even when the setting shifts. This means the two films are fundamentally incomparable on the terms critics often use. One is historical recreation, the other is cultural translation. Asking Bride and Prejudice to feel like a period drama is like asking a poem to function as prose. The aspect that confused Western critics most was the Bollywood-style musical numbers. Reviews frequently describe them as excessive or interrupting, revealing an expectation that songs should either advance plot or be diegetic entertainment. But Chadha designed the musical sequences to function as emotional exposition, borrowed from Bollywood storytelling, where songs replace internal monologue. When Lalita and her sisters sing No Life Without Wife, they're externalizing conflicted feelings about marriage pressure and autonomy in a way dialogue alone couldn't capture, without becoming heavy-handed. Martin Henderson noted in interviews that the songs act as windows into what characters think beneath their social veneers. This is particularly important in Austen adaptations, where characters are defined by what they don't say. In the 2005 film, that gap is maintained through lingering shots and Matthew Macfadyen's brooding intensity. Bride and Prejudice achieves the same psychological revelation through choreography and music, showing Darcy's growing understanding through his gradual integration into the visual language of the songs themselves. The choice to use music this way also allows Chadha to satirize cultural tourism. The Goa sequence, where Western characters encounter exotic India through a glamorized beach party, operates simultaneously as spectacle and critique. The film knows it's performing Indianness for a Western gaze, while also interrogating that gaze. This layered cultural commentary is inaccessible to traditional period adaptations because they're recreating rather than refracting. Lalita represents one of the most culturally specific feminist iterations of Elizabeth Bennet, precisely because her resistance looks different than Western expectations. Critics who found her softer than other Elizabeths missed how her feminism operates within Indian cultural contexts, where family obligation and individual autonomy exist in constant tension. Lalita doesn't reject marriage or dismiss tradition as inherently oppressive. Instead, she demands the right to choose while maintaining connection to her culture and family. This is a more complicated negotiation than simply walking away. Where Keira Knightley's Elizabeth challenges Darcy with wit and walks through muddy fields in deliberate rejection of feminine propriety, Aishwarya Rai's Lalita challenges Darcy through cultural pride. She defends India not as a tourist attraction, but as a living, complex society that doesn't need Western saving. Her feminism is inseparable from her national identity, which makes her initial prejudice about more than personal attraction. Darcy represents colonial condescension, economic imperialism disguised as globalization, and the assumption that modernization means Westernization. When she rejects his first proposal, she's rejecting his entire worldview. This shifts the romantic arc in ways that make some viewers uncomfortable. Henderson's Darcy is deliberately flattened. He has wealth but no cultural fluency. The film forces him into the position of learner rather than romantic hero, requiring him to earn respect before love becomes possible. Some critics read this as weak characterization, but it's actually a structural choice that redistributes romantic power. Lalita doesn't fall for Darcy because he's impressive. She falls for him because he listens, changes, and meets her on equal ground. The polarized reception reveals how much early 2000s film criticism struggled with work that refused easy categorization. Western reviewers often praise the film's color and energy while dismissing its narrative choices as confused, language that carries uncomfortable echoes of how non-Western art gets patronized. Meanwhile, some Bollywood audiences felt the film had been sanitized for Western consumption, that it flattened regional specificity to make Indian culture palatable. Both responses point to the impossible position crossover cinema occupies, expected to satisfy multiple audiences while rarely being judged on its own terms. In retrospect, the film's refusal to choose a single cultural allegiance looks less like confusion and more like intention. Chadha created something genuinely hybrid, and hybridity is uncomfortable because it challenges the idea that stories should have clear national or genre identities. The 2005 Pride and Prejudice succeeds because it knows exactly what it is: a prestige literary adaptation for audiences who want immersive period romance. Bride and Prejudice succeeds differently because it rejects that clarity, insisting that love stories in a globalized world can't be contained within single cultural frameworks. The film's visual excess, its tonal shifts, its mixing of Bollywood melodrama with Hollywood rom-com structure, these aren't flaws. They're arguments about what adaptation can do when it prioritizes translation over imitation. 20 years later, conversations about representation and accent bias have shifted dramatically. The criticism Aishwarya faced for her inconsistent accent now reads as bias toward non-Western English. The film's blending of cultural aesthetics, once dismissed as confused, now appears prescient in an era where global audiences expect stories that reflect multiple perspectives. Streaming platforms have introduced the film to viewers who approach it without 2004's marketing expectations, and many find it smarter and more emotionally honest than its initial reception suggested. This doesn't mean Bride and Prejudice is flawless. The pacing drags in places. Some jokes feel dated, but these are craft issues, not conceptual failures. The film knows what it's doing, using Jane Austen's skeleton to build a story about how power, pride, and love function when filtered through colonialism, globalization, and cultural exchange. That project was always going to be messy because the realities it explores are messy. The 2005 Pride and Prejudice offers the satisfaction of immersion, of being transported into another time where you can experience Austen's world with sensory richness. Bride and Prejudice offers something different: the challenge of watching a familiar story unfold in unfamiliar terms, of recognizing Austen's themes refracted through contemporary cultural conflicts that don't resolve neatly. Both approaches have value. The difference is that one invites you to escape into the past, while the other asks you to confront the present. This is Ladies First, watching women in movies. Here, we empower women by reviewing and discussing films that highlight their stories, struggles, and achievements. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, especially if you've been sleeping on this film all these years.